In the remote highlands of Scotland, many old folk tales speak of the fae folk, strange tall beings with piercing eyes and inscrutable ways. While some dismiss them as mere myths, others whisper of encounters like this one from 1997. In a small Scottish town, Nancy was a caring, hard-working midwife living with her 20-year-old son Kyle as a single mother. Though kind-hearted and endlessly polite with her patients, Nancy's modest income was a constant struggle to make ends meet. Kyle used to work as a bartender in the nearby pub. Their simple home was tidy but threadbare, with Nancy often working long hours to put food on the table. She dreamed of being able to afford better opportunities for Kyle's higher education, but those hopes seemed desperately out of reach. Little did Nancy know, a strange encounter one fateful night would transform their fortunes beyond her wildest imaginings, though the price they'd unwittingly agreed to pay would prove far more terrible than poverty. One midnight, there was a loud knock on the door. First, Kyle and Nancy ignored it, but when the door was banged 3 times, Kyle went down the stairs to see who was bothering them so late at night.
Mum, there are some really tall guys at the door. Should I get it?
At this hour? Who could it be?
Nancy opened the door. One of the tall men stepped forward and said,
Mom, we need your help as a midwife right away. A woman is about to deliver a baby.
Oh my, but why not take her to the hospital?
That goes against our traditions. Please, you must come with us to our home. We'll compensate you for your troubles.
Kyle whispered.
Mum, no way. You can't go off with these shady characters in the middle of the night.
I can't turn my back on a woman in need, Kyle. Don't worry, I'll be careful.
To the strangers,
lead the way.
Nancy's car wound its way down the narrow, tree-lined road as if they were leaving the human world behind. The twisted trunks appeared to reach out with clawed fingers as if to capture them. As Nancy stepped out of the car, an elderly woman waited on the deteriorating porch, clenching her rough hands anxiously. Without saying anything, she beckoned Nancy inside with an urgent crook of her finger. Inside, the only light came from the flickering flames of an ancient lantern. The old woman led Nancy down a musty hallway to a room where a stunningly beautiful woman was lying on a crude bed, her face twisted in pain from labor. The thing that struck Nancy most was how unusually tall these people were. They towered over her, as if they were beings from long ago times. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light that made Nancy instinctively look away. Pushing her uneasiness aside, Nancy focused on helping the woman in labor give birth. Despite the strangeness around her, Nancy's midwife skills were steady and practiced. Finally, the cries of a newborn baby girl broke the heavy silence as she came into the world. As Nancy cleaned and wrapped the baby, the mother looked at her with an expression of both gratitude and something unreadable.
We have no riches to pay you for your service,
the tall woman said in a flowing voice.
But take this pouch, a small gift which you must not open until you return home.
With shaking hands, Nancy accepted the deerskin bag, giving a respectful nod. Whatever payment was coming, she could never have imagined the miraculous and terrible truth about it. The 2 tall men drove Nancy back to her house without any trouble. As she stepped through the front door, she found Kyle waiting up for her anxiously.
Oh, Mom, you're finally back.
Kyle exclaimed, relief washing over his face as he pulled her into a tight hug. Nancy returned the embrace before holding up the strange deerskin pouch.
It's the strangest thing. After I helped that woman give birth, she gave me this as payment, but she instructed not to open it until we returned home.
Kyle's eyes went wide with curiosity as he took the drawstring bag, weighing it in his hands.
Well, you're home now. Let's see what's inside.
To his utter disappointment, Kyle could not believe what he was seeing.
Are you kidding me? After all that, they give you worthless coal crumbs? Unbelievable.
Kyle angrily throws the coal pieces, which clatter across the floor. Yet, as Nancy would soon learn, the Fae's gifts were seldom what they seemed. The next morning, Kyle went into the living room and stopped dead in his tracks, his jaw dropping open. Scattered across the floor were dozens of shimmering golden orbs, winking in the early sunlight.
Mom, get in here, quick!
Kyle hollered, his voice cracking with disbelief. Nancy came rushing out in her robe, alarmed by her son's frantic cries.
Kyle, what's wrong?
Look, the coal pieces! They turned into pure gold overnight!
Nancy followed his gesture and exclaimed aloud. There was no mistaking the glowing treasure dispersed throughout. She knelt and grabbed a handful to ensure it was real.
I can't believe it.
Nancy stammered, dumbfounded. In an instant, their ordinary lives had been transformed by an inconceivable stroke of luck, all thanks to the strange woodland folk and their mysterious payment. Nancy's heart swelled with gratitude, but an element of confusion also took root. Who were those unusual people who possessed such miraculous power? And if they were so wealthy, why did they live in such crumbling conditions, far from modern amenities? Nancy knew she owed them a great debt. But the mystery surrounding that fateful night had only deepened with this astonishing turn of events.
Kyle, get ready. We're going back to that spot in the forest.
Nancy told her son at breakfast. Kyle looked confused.
You mean where you helped that woman have her baby? Why do we need to go back there?
Because I need answers.
Nancy said firmly.
I'm so grateful for this wealth, but it doesn't make sense. Those people seemed poor, but they could turn coal into gold. I have too many questions.
Kyle thought about it, then finally agreed to go with his mom. They finished eating and then headed back into the woods. But when they reached the clearing where the old cottage had been, Nancy stopped in confusion. The small open area was completely empty. No rundown little house, no strange tall people, not even a sign that anyone had ever lived there.
This is the right spot. Yes, it is,
Nancy said, turning around slowly with a puzzled look on her face. Kyle looked all around too.
Are you sure about this place, Mom? Maybe we took a wrong turn somewhere.
Nancy realized the truth with a sinking feeling. No matter how carefully they retraced their steps, they would likely never find those mysterious woodland residents again, because it seemed they did not exist in the same reality as everyone else. Though deeply puzzled, Nancy tried to move on and embrace their miracle windfall. With the transformed gold, their fortunes reversed overnight. Nancy renovated her home and opened her own private clinic where she offered her affordable but outstanding midwifery services. Nancy admiring her new clinic.
All thanks to that strange night. I'll never forget their kindness, whoever they were.
Kyle's girlfriend Roxy whispered to Kyle.
But who were they? This sounds crazy. You have to spill all the details, Kyle.
Roxy was at the opening of Nancy's new clinic. When Roxy heard Nancy mention those people, she became very curious. Roxy was a young, crafty girl who was amazed to see how quickly Kyle and his mom's lives had changed and become so much better. She wanted to know the secret behind their sudden wealth. Roxy was a greedy person who would do anything to get what she wanted from others. Kyle initially protested, but Roxy's provoking eventually wore him down. He revealed the shocking truth about the Fae folks' strange payment. Roxy was the type of person who would scheme and be sneaky to get her hands on money or valuables, no matter who she hurt along the way. As she listened to Nancy's story, Roxy's mind was already whirring with selfish thoughts about how she could possibly take advantage of the situation for her own benefit. One evening, when Nancy was out, Kyle had Roxy over for dinner at their house. Roxy saw this as the perfect chance to snoop around and look for any leftover treasure from the strange people who had made them rich. After dinner, Kyle and Roxy drank a lot of alcohol. Soon, Kyle was so drunk that he went to bed. But Roxy had only pretended to drink as much as Kyle. She was still sober because she wanted to carry out her sneaky plan. As soon as Kyle was asleep, Roxy tiptoed into Nancy's bedroom. She quietly started going through all of Nancy's personal belongings, searching for any traces of leftover gold or valuables. Roxy didn't care that she was invading Nancy's privacy. She only cared about finding something for herself that she could steal. Roxy rummaged through Nancy's drawers, checked under the mattress, and looked everywhere she could for any sign of gold or money stashed away. Her eyes were greedy as she ruthlessly poked through Nancy's private space without any shame. She wasn't going to leave until she either found something to take or had looked everywhere possible.
A key. There must be a safe. Jackpot!
Roxy found the safe's key from Nancy's secret drawer. She impatiently looked for the safe, which she found behind Nancy's bedside table. When Roxy discovered the pouch of gold, her eyes widened and sparkled with excitement. She quickly and greedily snatched a few pieces from the pouch. Roxy's greed made her blind to the dangers of stealing from the Fae. The first warning signs came in the form of strange occurrences, such as glimpses of a pale, wizened figure watching, and eerie messages scrawled as if by unseen hands. One evening, Roxy had just finished her shower, toweling off as steam billowed around the small bathroom. As she wiped the fog from the mirror, she froze. There, etched into the condensation, were harsh, jagged words. "You stole it. You won't be spared." Roxy's heart pounded as she spun around, terrified, scanning the room. But there was no one there, just the faint, blurred laughter of a dispersing vapor. Trembling, she fled the bathroom, the cryptic threat lingering in her mind. Roxy thought that such an event was only the result of her guilt for stealing the gold, but something more terrible happened in the library the next day. Roxy sifted through the tall stacks, looking for the book she needed for her research paper. As she turned a corner, she had to suppress a scream. There, peering from between two rows of ancient tomes, was the withered face and cracked hand of a deathly pale woman. Roxy's breath caught in her throat as those sunken eyes stared at her, the craggy lips parted in a chilling smile. Then a bony finger extended from the shadowed aisle, calling out her in with a single crook.
You know what you've done. You will be punished for it.
An eerie voice like dead leaves rasped. The terrifying being retreated deeper into the gloomy stacks. When Roxy finally summoned the courage to scream for help, she turned to flee, only to crash into a bookcase and scatter texts across the floor. However, the strange woman had vanished, leaving only dread in her wake. Slowly, Roxy began losing her sanity after experiencing the horrific incidents. She locked herself in her room, unable to stop seeing and thinking about that eerie old woman everywhere. On a dark night, Roxy's eyes shot open, her heart pounding in the inky silence of her bedroom. Had she imagined that sound, or... There it was again, the unmistakable creak of footsteps on the stairs outside her room. With trembling hands, she clutched her blankets tight as the hair on her neck prickled. The heavy tread drew closer, each step like a death knell. Shallow breaths caught in her throat as Roxy watched the doorknob begin to turn with agonizing slowness. She shrank back against her headboard, willing her eyes to see in the gloom, as the door inched open on its hinges with a low groan. A shape darker than the night itself obscured the hall beyond. It paused, appearing to linger in the open doorway, as if considering her. Then, with terrifying certainty, Roxy felt unseen eyes find her in the darkness, boring into her and enjoying her helpless terror. The shape faded with the faintest of sounds, like a whisper in the dead air. But no sooner had Roxy begun to expel the trapped breath in her lungs, she heard a heavy thump down the hall, followed by a tortured creak. Fighting every instinct, she dragged herself out of bed and to the door, trembling violently. Peering into the murky corridor, she saw nothing odd until her gaze travelled to the storage room at the far end. Its door hung open with heavy slowness, as if an unseen force pressed against it. A sound then, like a distant chorus of ragged whispers arising from the black moor beyond that door, calling out her name. Roxy found herself drawn forwards, one trembling step after the next, until her hand was on the door, fingers digging into the varnished panels. Something slammed into the shelves from the depths of the storage room, causing a crackling bang of dislodged boxes and trinkets. Muffled, shrill voices, like dried leaves in the wind, hissed from the gloom, calling out to her and urging her to enter. Roxy threw open the door, a scream of pure terror escaping her lungs as something lashed out and trapped her, dragging her physically inside. The door slammed shut, sinking out her shrieks in a ringing silence. Roxy's mother bolted upright from her bedroom down the hall, joining her daughter's screams of terror as she dashed towards the storage room door. However, when she opened it, she discovered nothing but undisturbed darkness and decades of dust. Her daughter had vanished without a trace, as if pulled from existence itself. The next morning, Roxy's mother, devastated by her daughter's disappearance, confided everything to Kyle. The police were immediately notified, launching a frantic search for the missing girl. Despite their efforts, Roxy was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Nancy, stunned by the news, tried to comfort her son Kyle, who was deeply saddened and broken by the loss of his friend. Late that night, just as the house had fallen into a restless silence, there was a sudden knock at the door. Nancy, still awake and anxious, went to answer it. To her surprise, the same eerie old woman from her past stood at her doorstep.
You, what are you doing here?
Nancy's mind raced as memories flooded back. She reluctantly invited the old woman inside, her heart pounding in her chest.
Why are you here?
The old woman holding out pieces of gold that glitter in the dim light.
Have you lost something?
Nancy shook her head in denial, but her eyes widened in horror as the old woman placed the gold pieces in her hands.
The one who stole it has met her fate.
Nancy's breath caught in her throat. She now understood what had happened to Roxy.
Please send her back.
The old woman shaking her head slowly, her voice cold.
In our world, thieves are never forgiven.
With a ghostly laugh, the old woman vanished, leaving Nancy standing alone in the darkness, clutching the cursed gold. Roxy was never found, and her disappearance became a haunting mystery. Nancy, now burdened with the dreadful knowledge, could never bring herself to tell Kyle the truth. The sinister events of that night remained her secret, a dark shadow over her life.